Why are we doing this recipe? You know, we got to looking around on the internet thinking about what are we going to cook? And we wondered, I wonder what is the world's oldest recipe. We found it, lamb stew. This recipe actually dates back to 1730 BC. Babylon tablets is what they were on, and really when you get into that area, which is now Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Iran. So this is really a pretty wide region that this is covering. You know, this was the earliest civilization that pioneered a written language, mathematics, legal justice, and culinary arts. You know, these tablets were unearthed in the early 1900s, and they found their way to Yale. Now, at that time when they were looking at these and researching these, they thought they were medical records. It wasn't until the 1980s that they got to doing more research and found out that what? This was really the first written cookbook. So folks, let's recreate this recipe that's nearly 4,000 years old and find out what our ancestors were really eating. Back during this time, they were really big in agriculture, but also herding. The predominant source of things that they were herding back then was lamb. But I'm sure as this dish even improvised and maybe even changed just a little, that they used some fowl. They even made a change to beef later on, but today we are using lamb. The original recipe calls for leg of lamb that you dice. I could not find a leg of lamb, but I did find some front shoulder. So I trimmed the fat off the front shoulder, diced it up so it would render down faster. Now when I'm talking about rendering, I'm putting this in a stock pot on low heat, and we're just going to let that fat just soak right out of that lamb. Now when it gets to where that's all that there is, and you'll see it because things will brown, the little crispies will remain in there, you just strain them out, dip them, save them. Them are the pups. And you need to reserve that grease because it is the base for this stew. So we're going to take this lamb and we're going to debone it, and then we're going to also cut it in bite-sized pieces. So we're going to get that out here. And you notice we have no pups in camp, Shan. I don't know if they've never had lamb or they're just not big on lamb in this recipe. So we'll find out later, we will. So go ahead and take this piece, slice it, then come back over and just slice it into bite-sized pieces. So when you're trimming that and you see a seam in here, you know, you can make meat like this more tender by separating that seam, and then you're not cutting plumb through it every time. You have two different pieces of meat that you're really cutting on. Duker, since you're here, there's a piece of fat right there. Looky there. Oh, come on. It ain't that bad. We'll get this finished up and I'll meet you at the fire. Got our grease back hot, got the lamb diced up like we want it. In the original recipe, I didn't see nothing about them seasoning the meat ahead of time, but I'm going to. Just with coarse ground black pepper and just regular old salt. So let's get that in that stock pot. And this is about a pound of diced meat that we finished with. We're going to give that a stir. We just want that to brown on all sides before we go on any further. Well, the meat as it browned up, it has. Now, this recipe called for about a half a cup of water. We're going to let it have that. And it called for beer. Now, I don't have any telephone numbers to reach none of them folks back 4,000 years ago to ask them what kind of beer did they drink. But the beers that they were sort of talking about were sort of a darker beer, but maybe a fruity, sweety beer. This is about the only beer that I could find that didn't say Coors Light or Budweiser right here where I'm at. So we're going to put a cup full in there, which is 8 ounces. How much is that bottle? Oh, I'd say 11, so we're going to use about 3/4. So we're going to bring this back to a good simmer and let it begin to boil. And then we're going to add our veggies to it, some spices, and get ready to have the 4,000-year-old recipe sitting in a bowl. You know, we had brought that back to a simmer, nearly a boil, and things are smelling a little better. They are. I'm like it, I am. Now remember in this countryside that they had back then, very fertile, rich ground. I mean, they had a lot of agricultural crops growing there. Anything you might wish you had in your garden, I bet they was growing in some of that good fertile dirt. And we got some arugula, some beets, a shallot, some garlic, and a white onion. Now they used fresh cilantro, but y'all know me. If you've watched this channel any length of time, me and fresh just don't get along, so I'm going to use dried. And they use cumin. Now they probably ground their cumin with a mortar and a pedestal before they put it in there. Me, I'm going to shake mine in there. So, did I mention that we had beets, Shan? That was where I really thought this recipe sort of got off to me, is I've never seen a stew recipe that had beets in it. So we did dice up some beets. So we're going to start with these since they're in my hand first. Some dried cilantro. I can't really see in there, so we're going to hope that that's enough. Some of that cumin. Got all our veggies in there and got stirring it around. And you know, this called for a half a cup of water and a cup of beer. Now me, I think that's going to cook down a little, and I would like to have a little broth more in there. So let me fetch this beer. So I think I'm going to add some more beer, Shan. I think it needs some more broth. We're just going to go ahead and put the whole bottle in there. That does look better, Mage, it does. We're going to keep that, probably I'd say a low to medium simmer with a lid on it till that lamb gets good and tender. Now the Babylon tablets, there were 3 of them, and these contained about 40 recipes they did. Now really you have the makings of the first ever cookbook. Now there were a lot of recipes in there for stew, a lot of breads, a lot of soup, and even some bird. These recipes that are on these tablets were pretty vague. Not like the recipes we see today. There wasn't any like step-by-step instruction, add this, add that. They just had it laid out. It was more for the experienced chef during the times, and he could figure this out and he could cook it to the best of his ability. Well, it is a done deal, it is. I hope them ancient chefs would be proud. We let this cook about 45 minutes till that lamb got good and tender. You don't want to cook it to where them beets begin to fall apart and you can't see them no more, so keep an eye on it. You really, like I say, a medium-low simmer there. Stir it every once in a while. I did have to add a little more water to this when I was cooking it because it sort of cooked down a little, so keep an eye on that. Now I'm serving this with some pita bread. They'd have probably had some kind of ancient flatbread that they served this with, so that's what I have here today. But I'm going to let y'all in on a secret. I mean, I need you to listen real close. Don't judge me, okay? I have cooked lamb for lots of people across the United States. I've never been fond of lamb. Any way I've ever fixed it, from barbecued to baked to broiled to stewed, anything in the world. But if them folks can fix it 4,000 years ago and I can try to replicate it, well, I am sure going to have me a bite. First, I'm going to taste this broth because I do love a leek. I think you get that sort of oniony flavor with a leek, but you get a little sweetness too that it brings out. That broth is pretty good, I'm telling you. Now we're just going to get some all of it. The beet, there's some arugula. We got it all in one bite. Do the Egyptian dance. One of these days I'm going to take a hammer and chip me a recipe in one of them rocks. Maybe somebody will use it one of these days. But it is with great pride, privilege, and honor that I tip my hat to all our servicemen and women and all the veterans that have kept that old flag flying over camp. We commend you all. Y'all get up on in here. I'm going to give you a 4,000-year-old hug. Might even be some mummy dust come off of me. God bless you, each and every one, and I'll see you down the oldest recipe trail.
Go ahead and try that beer.
Try it?
Because you're a big Coors Light. You only drink that.
I just drink light beer. This says dark.
Just give it a try. Tell me what you think.
You know, I guess if it was really cold and you was really hot and there wasn't no water in camp, you might drink one of these.